Alright, peoples, it is time. It is down to the top 10 of my top 100 of, 2016 edition top 100 games in 2017. Don't think about it too hard. Your head will explode. These are the top 10 games I like the most right now at this point in time. Probably soon to change. Then after this, stick around though. We're going to have some final thoughts. But in the meantime, let's get to the list without further ado. My number 10 is Small World. Here, this is the Small World Underground box, but this is just another of the 3 boxes I keep my Small World stuff in. It's from Days of Wonder, who is now part of the large corporate conglomerate known as Asmodee, who is coming for you and your children. But that's fine, don't worry about it. I'll keep this here. It is my number 10 this year, but it was my number 12 last year. I actually moved up a couple of spots. I did play it a couple of times this past year. I think, did anything come out for it this year? It's hard to tell. So I think it's been a while since the last expansion. But it's always been a hit in my group and with the people I've chosen to play it with. That made it sound like I only selectively choose people. Over on Board Game Geek, I actually thought it would be higher than this. It is ranked number 143 overall. Maybe Underground is higher, I don't know. It has an average user rating of 7.4. It's from Felipe K. Arts, who had originally done Vinci, which was the original version of this game. And I can't believe there's still some Vinci holdouts who think that it's a superior game. In my opinion, having seen Vinci played, I know I haven't played it, but I believe Small World to be the better version of it. It is in some ways, it's just a very prototypical area control game. There's some areas. We need to control them, put out some tokens, and take them, and then you will get points for them. Where the fun of the game comes in is not... First off, it's the theme of it and the look of it, where you're taking control of all these different fantasy races. Lots of fantasy races. Right out of one of the base games, either this or the original or Underground. And mixing and matching them, tons of different expansions. And it's just really cool to see them all out there. Just a very good visual representation of the game. And then every single race has its own unique power, plus another combination tile, a special power badge that combines with them. And it's very interesting to see what the different combinations of powers are and how they work out. They're random every time. And there's a great system that I talked about, actually. I think Small World is the most notable one to use this system. Firenze, which was my number 100 this year, or last year, was use the system too, where you have to choose a card in Firenze. In this case, you have to choose a race and power combo. And you can choose one further down the line. But in order to do that, you need to give up coins, which are victory points, and put them on there. And then your opponents get to take those coins too if they take one of the other ones. But you might really want one of those ones further down the line, so it might be a worthwhile investment for you. I love that. And together with the different variety of powers and the way they interact with the terrain, and just the fact that the game is relatively simple, so I could teach it to new players. It's always been a hit, and it's fantastic, and I'll keep buying expansions if they keep putting them out, because variety can only help this game. That is Small World in any version, my number 10. Over on Board Game Geek, though, TJ Shields, no relation to TJ Hooker, says, no one under the age of 30 is going to get that reference. Playing this is just like building a lava lamp. Everything just swishes back and forth. Now, I like lava lamps in the right moment, but wowing over it in a lighted, sober room isn't one of them. This guy needs to get together with the Wizard Van guy. Now, my number 9, until it gets its proper English release, hopefully within the next few months, fingers crossed, from the Kickstarter version, I had all of its different components in a shitty little homemade box that I made, but the expansion box looks a little bit better, so I'll put that out. It is Heart of Crown. This is the Fairy Garden expansion. It was originally from Flip Flops, I think, is either the publisher or the designer, I can't remember. But it will be getting put out by Japanime Games, finally, with an official English release. I've been playing the pasted up Japanese version, and hopefully that will be very soon. But because it hasn't had an official release yet, it is ranked number 3,644 on Board Game Geek, with an average user rating of 7.7, not culled from very many ratings. It was actually my number 8 last year, so it only knocked down. It actually just went back one space. that's attributable to not much of anything. I played it maybe once or twice in the past year. Maybe if I'd played it more, it would be further up. There's actually a couple of other smaller, even smaller than this expansions I haven't played, though I do have them, and I probably won't play them now since the official English version is coming out. But anyways, Heart of Crown is one of my favorite deck builders. Is it my favorite? You'll have to wait and see. But it's very interesting compared to all the rest of them because it mixes together a bunch of disparate elements. You have some elements of Dominion where you will have static sets of cards that you purchase from, but those static sets of cards come out via a random method as the game progresses. It's very hard to explain. You had to randomize sets of cards, but as they get put out into a row, the like cards will stack up on top of each other and will stay there until they're all purchased. Then you had the aspect of you were trying to nominate a princess within the very loose theme of the game. And each princess has a different special power, and as soon as you build up your empire enough, you'll get to take one of the princesses and put her in your kingdom. Now she's your princess or your queen or whatever, and you'll get access to her special power, which might be a one-and-done thing. It might be a perpetual effect. And some of them are better than others, but some of those ones that are really good are much harder to get and may take you longer. And you're playing to a point threshold, so it's kind of a race in a sense. There's also the way how you build your empire, by the way. You do the traditional deck building stuff of how you purchase cards, but you can sock away cards permanently, land cards, which are just your basic resources, permanently into your empire. You'll never be able to play them again during the course of the game, but they are land for your princess and queen to rule over and to inhabit. And you'll put your victory point cards there as well, and that will make them count as victory point cards. And there's just so many different types of cards in the game. Also, the way you play the cards is different than other deck building games, because in some games you can just play an unlimited amount of cards. In games like Dominion, you have an action, like one card to play, then maybe you can get more actions if that card gives you more actions to play. In this one, you can chain together cards. Cards have little arrows on them, and if you can play a card that is pointing in the right direction and it can match up with another card, you can play the next card and keep the chain going as long as you possibly can. So that influences your decisions of which cards to buy. And yes, it has cute anime-style artwork, and I'm a sucker for it. I'm not going to lie. All these different things together makes it such a fascinating deck-building game, and it's criminal. Criminal! Lock the people up! I don't know what people that didn't bring this over here sooner. So, bless Japanime Games for doing so finally. They certainly know how to pick their Japanese deck-building games, because Heart of Crown, I think, is the best one to come out of there ever to this point. That is my number 9, easily. Now, over on Board Game Geek, again, it hasn't had an official English release yet. There's slim pickings. I think I picked the best, most interesting comment last year. I don't want to pick it again. But there actually is a digital version of this on Steam Greenlight. So I picked a review from there. Wimmy Bun says, "Hi, I am Wimmy. Hi, I am from Japan. Your game is cute. Many, many cute girl. I am in your game for many, many time. But I no understando all. What you talk? What is language? You say Japanese there? Sorry for my question. Bye-bye, America." Oh, Wimmy. So incorrigible. What are we going to do with you? My number 8 was my number 9 last year. So it actually just kind of flipped with Heart of Crown. And that is Shadows over Camelot from Days of Wonder, now part of the large, over-sprawling tentacles of the Asmodee Corporation, who I'm sure some cyber hacker elves will be fighting against in the next 100 years. It was ranked number 284 over on Board Game Geek. I'm surprised it's actually that low, or high as you might want to say it, with an average user rating of 7.2. This game seemed like it was beloved for a long time. I guess it's kind of falling out of favor at this point, which makes sense. I mean, it had one expansion, and that was many years ago. Well, maybe 4 or 5 years ago at this point, maybe more than that. So it's kind of fallen out of favor, but this is one of the very first games I ever got, and it's stayed consistently one of my favorites. I love it. I will always look for an opportunity to play it. And some people I play it with are like, yeah, we got to play that again and again and again. Some people are like, no, that's okay. So it is a little bit of a polarizing game. But essentially, if you're not familiar with it, you and the other players are Knights of the Round Table. And you are working together to fight back against the evil forces of Mordred, who is closing in on Camelot. He's got ballistas and catapults at the gates. He's got evil Saxons and Picts who are storming your beaches. The Black Knight is like being a douchebag, I guess, and you just have to put a stop to that. And all these different things that you have to worry about. And you also want to go get Excalibur. You want to stop Lancelot from also being a douchebag and trying to get armor for himself and all this different types of stuff by fighting a dragon and so on. And the way that you actually fight back against these things is by poker hands, which is what I think most people have a problem with. But it's just a way to keep the game going forward. You have to make sets of cards in different formats depending on what you're trying to accomplish out in the game, and then keep progressing forward through the game and getting closer and closer to victory and fighting back and preventing the losing conditions from happening. Now, if this was all of the game, it would just be, it's an okay cooperative game. What, of course, makes this such a fantastic game is that this is one of the original traitor games. One of the knights is, or potentially is, a traitor to the cause. They are secretly working for Mordred. And I say potentially is because this is also one of the first games to introduce the concept of there maybe a traitor, because you mix one in, but you take a card out, and so you're like, there's like a very small chance that there won't be a traitor in the game. Very small, so there's probably a traitor, but you just don't know. So did one of your fellow players make a really stupid move, or are they working against you? You just don't know for sure. You just have to keep following the trail of breadcrumbs to see, and hoping that you don't give that person too much power. Like, oh look, that player really wants Lancelot's armor for some reason. Why? Are they just like, oh, it'll really help us out? Or is it, oh, I just want to make sure the good guys don't have it for when I turn evil? And so I love the tension in the game. It looks fantastic, as all Days of Wonders games, or most of them do. Great components, great miniatures for the knights. Lots of variety. The expansion adds a lot to it. More variety of cards, bad cards, and good cards. An interesting and frustrating system with Merlin in it. And I love it. I mean, it can go a little bit long, but it's sort of bad because it's longer with more players, and you need more players for it to be the most fun. But man, when you get the right group of people, it's so good, and I still love it to this day. Thematically and gameplay-wise, it's one of my favorite games. Well, obviously one of my favorite games. That's my number 8, Shadows over Camelot, over on Board Game Geek. Dogzard says, no relation to Dogcopter, says, I really hate any game that has a traitor mechanic, especially this one. I have banned this one from our game group, never to see the light of day again. It would take threat of death to get me to even consider playing this one again. Ever. He must be delightful to play games with. My number 7, which was my number 6 last year, so it's just moved back a space, that is Imperial Settlers, which was ranked number 102, just out of the top 100 on Board Game Geek, and has an average user rating of 7.6. It's from Portal Games and Ignacy Trebacek, another game from him on my list. The other one was Robinson Crusoe, and maybe there's one other one too. Now, Imperial Settlers is a card that has one of my favorite mechanisms, which is, now, of course, I love deck building games, but the second favorite card mechanism that I like is when you can use a card for multiple things. And in the case of Imperial Settlers, you can build the card out in your little civilization. You're one of the, just a famous civilization from our history. There's no real attention paid to the logistics of, how they're coexisting in different time periods and across the world. But Romans, the Japanese, barbarians, I guess supposed to be Germanic barbarians, and so on, or Egyptians. And you're just trying to build up your civilization. You can put out cards, put out different representing parts of your civilization and giving you special bonuses and things like that. Or alternatively, you can make deals with those cards in order to give you more production during the course of the game. Or you might have to sacrifice those cards in order to build bigger and better buildings. And there's cards can do different things, and you might try to focus on some different aspect. Every civilization has its own little special ability, something that it focuses more on. One civilization might get more swords, which means they're more combative and they want to take out their opponents more, or destroy their own cards from their hands and get just some instant resources for that. Whereas other civilizations are just build as much as possible. The Japanese can actually defend their territory with little samurais, which means they put their workers on their cards. Just little things like that are just fantastic in the game. But essentially, it's just a very, it's a civilization building game, but a super light one. I just love the variety of cards, the different ways that you can get points. There's an Atlanteans expansion that's really fantastic that just, because the Atlantean faction, aside from adding a bit of fantasy science fiction to the game, just works completely differently with their little gears they put on cards and things like that. So I love the variety of cards, the way that they're used, the sort of build up of the game and how you build out your little civilization, the way the game looks, the artwork, fantastic. It's also been a hit with everyone I've taught it to. Even new players are a little bit overwhelmed by some of the systems in the game, but afterwards they're like, oh no, I totally get this and I want to play it again. So that is Imperial Settlers, my number 7. On Board Game Geek, though, WK Over, or Week Over, says, our game was spoiled when the Barbarian player was accidentally assigned the Egyptian deck, and vice versa, which A, was very funny, and B, caused the game to be aborted after only 10 minutes. Trust me, that was long enough for me to make an assessment with 95% confidence interval. Next. 95%, folks. 95%. That's all I needed. My number 6 was my number 4 last year. It got bumped back a couple of spaces. That is Dead of Winter from Plaid Hat Games. Overstuffed here with stuff from the second standalone game, which was The Long Night. It is ranked number 31 on Board Game Geek. I never would have guessed that. I really would have thought, if Shadows over Camelot is stuck back in the 200s, I really would have thought this would have been languishing back in at least the 100s. But people love it. It is ranked. It has an average user rating of 7.9. Dead of Winter is a zombie game. It's definitely the highest ranked zombie game. It might be the only one on my list, as a matter of fact. We'll find out in a second, or a few minutes. But Dead of Winter takes the zombie mechanism and actually, much like the show The Walking Dead, when it was good, pushes the zombies to the background. They're just a thing you need to worry about. They're a hazard. They're an environmental hazard you and the other players need to worry about. Really what's going on is that you need to use your special character abilities to meet your goals. Now there's an individual goal, or there's a universal goal that everyone has to try and meet nominally, but you all have your own individual goal to meet as well. And if you don't meet your goal, your secret goal, you don't win. Doesn't matter if all the other players meet their goals and you all meet the universal goal together, you will not win. And so that's going to cause you to do whatever it takes to meet your goal, which might be hoarding food. But you need food for your little post-apocalyptic zombie apocalypse colony to survive. You need to be feeding yourselves, potentially, if you're in the colony, and all the helpless people that are back in the colony. And if you don't, the colony suffers and loses morale and might die. And so if people say, wait a minute, you've got a lot of cards from the supermarket. You probably have food. Why aren't you helping us? They're going to think that you're potentially the traitor. Oh yes, there's a traitor in this game. Maybe. Just like with Shadows over Camelot, which makes it interesting that they're both right next to each other, or with a couple of spaces of each other. Dead of Winter has the possibility of there being a traitor, and you can actually adjust how likely it's going to be or not. But that possibility is always going to make you doubt and be very distrustful of your other people. And even just knowing that people are working for themselves to get their own goal because they want to win, whether they're trying to tank the entire colony or not, which is what a traitor would do, just adds a layer of interestingness to the game that other games don't have. You combine that together with fantastic looking artwork from one of Plaid Hat's known artists they've worked on other games for, and just very interesting mechanisms of all the different characters, tons of different characters in the game, all with their own special abilities, and just enough little bits of humor in the game, not too much, and even some mature cards as well, which was surprising to me, because a lot of really religious folks and overly sensitive people have no problem playing a game where there's zombies devouring human flesh and people bashing in brains and using their guns to shoot people in the head. But they really can't tolerate curse words. Oh, the worst. So anyways, fuck those people. Moving on, that was my number 6, Dead of Winter from Plaid Hat Games. However, over on Board Game Geek, Hoffcorp has some very strong words. You have no agency. This is a great game for unintelligent people. If you understand how the system works, you can exploit it for a draw or a loss, and you would realize most outcomes can only be achieved by rolling better. If you are too intelligent to believe rolling better is an intelligence-based skill, then this is nothing but a terrible slog through a boring game. Terrible game, no redeeming quality, it just keeps going on. Not really a game as bad as all those Arkham games. My number 5 is another game that is supposed to be horror-based, and it was actually number 5 last year as well. Now, I was making fun of myself for having quite a few games that somehow ended up in the same spot, but it makes sense since my top 10 hasn't really changed that much. That it would still be in the same spot. But that is Eldritch Horror here, and it's part of the game in its newest expansion box, the Dreamlands expansion. I think I have 4 different big boxes for this game, the base game, 2 other big boxes in this one. But over on Board Game Geek, it's ranked number 36. This game has really risen to become one of the best and most loved of the Arkham games. Was it higher or lower than Mansions of Madness New Edition? I don't know. But it has an average user rating of 8.8. It's from Corey Kaniska and Fantasy Flight Games. Of course it is. Eldritch Horror, I loved it since I first played it. I didn't like Arkham Horror at all, and a lot of people were saying, "Oh, it's just a redux of Arkham Horror with just worldwide maps of Arkham." Please, now you're making me buy all this stuff again. Look here, buddy. First off, watch your tone. Second, Arkham Horror sucked. Eldritch Horror is fantastic. Eldritch Horror it looks like a ton of stuff. Even with just the base game and no expansions, you're setting up a ton of stuff out there, and people look at it and are like, "Oh, it's overwhelming. Look at all this stuff. You're going to teach me all of this?" But the reality is the game is very simple. You're just moving to a spot, and then you take a couple of actions, draw a card, do what the encounter says. And that might sound like, oh, well, that's so few things that you're doing, it sounds terrible. But it's all in purpose of an incredibly thematic and rich experience. This is one of the most thematic games that I own, and it doesn't force you to come up with crap on the fly like a storytelling game, or it doesn't force feed you too much of the stuff. Instead, you just read a little bit of the card, and then you have to do what it tells you to do. But it could be like, oh, you find some nightmare gaunt creatures in the alleyway, or you have to make a deal with this back alley trader. And then you test, and each character, there's tons of different characters in the game, part of the Arkhamverse. They all have their own little special traits and abilities, and you're trying to just prevent the awakening of this old one. There's all kinds of items that you can buy. You go around the world, find special artifacts. The expansions, including the Dreamlands expansion, add little adventure paths, which are even extra side adventures you can go on. There's prelude cards in some of the later expansions, including this one, where you give a little bit more backstory as the game starts, and it influences the setup of the game as well. So there's a ton of variety, lots of rich thematic elements, fantastic artwork and design, so many good things about it. It's a long game. It actually works well solo as well, and the less players you play it with, the better because of the length. But putting that aside, it's one of my favorite cooperative games, obviously, and just a fantastic game altogether. That is Eldritch Horror, my number 5 last year and this year. Over on Board Game Geek, Uwick says, I'm horrified by how long it took and how boring it was the whole time. My number 4 was my number 3 last year. Slid back just one space, and that is the infamous Cosmic Encounter, the newest edition, newest in this case being 5 years old, from Fantasy Flight Games. It has an average user rating of 7.6 and is ranked number 86 overall on Board Game Geek. I'm actually surprised this is in the top 100 because there's a lot of people who hate this game like poison, including in my own game group. Offset by the people like myself who love it in my game group. It's actually one of the oldest games on the list, if not the oldest game, if you count the other editions of the game, because this game was made, I think, back in either the early 80s or the late 70s. It's that old, has been through several different editions from several different publishers, and the newest edition from Fantasy Flight has been around for quite a long time. At this point, it has a lot of expansions, including a brand new expansion that I should have put up here with it that is a lot of fun, too. Cosmic Encounter is fantastic because, now, on the surface of it, it's a very simple game of you trying to conquer your opponent's planets. Everyone has a set of planets with their little spaceships on it, and you point every round, so you draw a card to determine who you're going to have an encounter with. You point the dial at them, you have an encounter with them, and it's with card play, where everyone takes a card from their hand, you and the other player, you can ask for allies, and then, when you're both ready, you flip the card over, you see what happens, and you might win, you might lose. Where the fun of the game comes in is in a couple of things. First off, this is also a negotiation game. You can make whatever kind of deals you want. You're not bound to anything. You can actually, if you play the right card, you can negotiate with the other player, the negotiate card, and you can trade colonies. You're trying to get colonies on other people's worlds in order to win the game. So you might trade colony for a colony, you might trade cards from your hand, and it just works. It's very simple, and it works very well for negotiation. But the best part of the game are the aliens, the powers that you have. There's even just the base game that's pictured here has so many aliens in it, and then every expansion adds like 20 to 30 more, and I've got them all, and there's so much variety. Every alien has a power that completely breaks the game in their favor. Wacky, weird, ridiculous things. And some of them are way overpowered. Some of them are much more powerful than the other aliens. But that's okay, because you and the other players will team up to take that person down. And some of the powers are really, really weak, but that's okay. You won't be a threat. So people will be like, yeah, I'll ally with you, come and help me. Some of the powers, actually, their powers are all about helping the other players, and then thereby giving you benefit, which is fine, because then other people will like you. They'll be like, yeah, I want you on my side. And that's how this game works. And now you can have bad games of Cosmic Encounter. That's the biggest problem I have with the game, is that for every like 5 fantastic games of it you'll have 1 or 2 like really bad games, because you just don't have the right people who want to negotiate. People team up for the entirety of the game based on out-of-game relationships. Or you just have a bad combination of powers, and it's just like, whoa, this just broke. But that chaos is kind of what I love, and when it works so well that it makes up for the bad spots. That is, and I'll again, like other games I've mentioned on this list, I'll keep the expansions coming. I'll take every single one of them. That is Cosmic Encounter from Fantasy Flight Games, my number 3. Over on Board Game Geek, Lucky Jim said, played this recently after many years. A complete waste of time. My character was so powerful, no one could stop me winning, even when they all worked together. I guess some people call this complete lack of balance zany. I call it shit. Alright, we're getting into my top 3, and for those of you who have been following the list over the past few years, you know that things are going to get interesting, because you probably can guess what the 3 games are, but apparently there's been some weirdness going on and some things have been moved around, so let's get to it. My number 3, which was formerly my number 2, and before that my number 1, was and is Seasons from Asmodee and Libelid. Again, it was number 2 last year. It is ranked number 129 on Board Game Geek. Always a bridesmaid, never the bride. It's never quite broken into the top 100. And has an average user rating of 7.5. It's from Regis Bonasse, who also did Lords of Zidit, which was like number 99 on this list. Seasons is a wonderful card game. Now, this game appeals to the Magic player in me. But I don't play Magic as much as I used to. It's on my list because Magic as a core game is fantastic, and I'll occasionally break out the pre-made decks that I have. But I can't be involved in the lifestyle. It's just too much for me. Seasons gives me the feel of building something, like building a thing of cards out in front of you, and using combos against the other players, and progressing forward without having to build a deck ahead of time, being part of like a competitive scene, and collecting and buying random packs. In fact, there was like 2 or 3 expansions for this game, and they never did anything else for it. I wish they would, but it's fine as it is. And on top of that, it's not just, you have the cards that are in the game representing different magical creatures and magical artifacts. You're a loose theme of you being wizards involved in a tournament. But on top of that, the way that you actually get these cards is through a draft in the beginning. Then you might get some more during the course of the game. You're punished for having too many cards in hand, so you're encouraged to cast your cards as much and as fast as you can, and using their abilities over the course of the game. Obviously playing ones that are have better long-term effects early in order to reap the most benefit from them. And whacking your opponents with nasty cards when they have the most potential to lose. But that would be enough right there to make it at least a little bit interesting. What makes it even better and puts it over the top for me is a whole other system of dice rolling and the nominal seasons. You start off in winter, and then you're eventually going to progress to spring, summer, and fall. And how you're going to do that is you'll figure out how fast you're moving along this track via dice. The dice that you draft the cards in the beginning, then you draft the dice every round of the game. The dice are going to give you extra mana that you can use to cast your cards. They might give you straight up points via crystals. Crystals can also be a currency in the game. Or they can give you ways to transfuse those, and they also will judge how fast along the track, the season's track, is going to go along. Whatever dice you don't choose, the pips on that tell you how fast along you have to go, which is another decision you have to make. How, if you're the last one choosing dice, how fast or how slow do I want the game to go, and how fast do I want it to progress? Things, crystals, the crystals you can transfer mana for are more or less depending on the season. In changing of the seasons and the changing of the year can give you special bonuses based on your cards. It's a whole other thing that intertwines very, very well with the classic sort of card combo style gameplay. And on top of all of that, it looks wonderful. The artists that they use for this, including Nayade, who is one of my favorite artists, are just fantastic. So all of this added together with a beautiful chunky dice too. It's just so fun and so good and a beautiful game. I know that some people who are encouraged by me choosing Seasons as my favorite game are discouraged to see it ever so slowly being knocked down the list. But listen, I've played this game tons. I still love it. That's never going to change. It's just I like a couple other things a little more right now, and who knows, maybe it'll move back up in the future. That is Seasons, my number 3, my number 2, and prior to that, my number 1. Over on Board Game Geek, Cancel Who says, according to BGG, a score of 2 means extremely annoying. Will never play again. I really want to give this a 0. I really want to set this non-game on fire. I really hate this game. My number 2 was my number 7 last year. So it only moved up 5 spots, but within the top 10, that's a pretty big deal, I would say. And that is, and I will show you just one of the several boxes I have for it. This is Legendary, a Marvel deck building game. This in particular is the Secret Wars 1 expansion. They had 2 of these. This is the first one, the good one, because it has Spider-Gwen. That is my number 2 this year. It was number 7 last year. It is ranked number 104 on Board Game Geek. I think it might have crept into the top 100 at some point, but it moved back down. And has an average user rating of 7.6. It's from Upper Deck. I have been talking about this game a lot in the past year, mainly because I just keep putting out expansions for it. And every time I get an expansion, I tell you how much I love the game. And so I'm starting to sound like a broken record at this point, to the point where I'm like, am I really going to review the next small expansion? I don't know. I think you guys get the idea. But the point of it is, on its own, the original base game of Marvel Legendary was good. When it got more expansions, when the systems were fleshed out, it became great. And then it became amazing. And then it just became one of my favorite games of all time, and that will never change. Because now I have so much stuff for it, so many iconic Marvel characters, weirdo Marvel characters that no one cares about, but that's fine, they're in the game. There was a time when I asked my friends, dude, there's so many Marvel characters in this, just name your favorite character, I'll grab them, we'll play with them. And then he'd be like, oh, Nightcrawler. I'm like, oh, I don't have that one. And they're like, oh, okay, well, Magic. I'm like, oh, she's not here either. But now, if I asked him that question, I could give him fucking Captain America and Devil Dinosaur. Okay, there's so many weirdo characters in this game now. And now, for some people, that is a barrier of entry. Like, oh, wait, I have to get the expansions for this to actually be amazing? Well, then forget it. I'm out. And I totally understand that. But for me, it has been a labor of love to get the expansions, to play with them, to find new card combinations. It plays fantastic solo, and that's one of the ways that whenever I get a new expansion, I'll play it with some people, and then I'll really delve into it solo, because I could try those new characters with a bunch of old ones, mix them together, try to get the best combos going on. I love that. So much variety. The way the schemes work in this game, that's another set of variety of things. There are new systems added all the time. Every scheme might change, like blow up the helicarrier, and it'll actually have a spatial element to the game of how that works. It's deck building, which is amazing. Deck building Ascension style, but with lots of added complexity. You can ignore the only really bad part of the game is the setup, which I'm just used to at this point. I don't really care. And also the fact that it's technically semi-cooperative, but you can ignore that. In most cases, with some of the harder villains you have to fight, you should ignore that, because otherwise you're all going to die. So if you take away those bad things, you're left with my favorite deck building game, Spoiler, there's no deck builder in the number 1 spot. And the best Marvel game by far, and just a wonderful game altogether. That is Legendary Marvel, a deck building game from Upper Deck, my number 2. Now, over on Board Game Geek, many people not so keen on it. Joel Peterson says, dry as a biscuit, themeless as a kinesia, runaway leader problem, misuse of the lichens, he says. Boo. It's like poetry, it rhymes. Okay, my number 1 is the most anticlimactic thing ever, if you've been paying attention to my channel at all. But some of you might be brand new to the channel, and this will be a surprise to you. And for those of you who are not new and you're not surprised, but maybe you're watching this with your loved ones around the campfire, or for you'd be watching my channel out in the middle of nowhere, sure, let's go with it. But you're watching the channel with other people, act surprised at least. Just be like, oh my god, I had no idea he would choose that one. Please, for my benefit. In any event, it is, of course, Kingdom Death Monster. It was my number 1 last year. It's my number 1 this year. And yes, I will bring the box up. There's a lot of Kingdom Death fans who are like, dude, you actually have all the stuff in the box? Everything just got wrecked. I know. I probably shouldn't have done that. But this is the massive box that it comes in. Self-published by Adam Poots and his company, Kingdom Death. It has an average user ranking of 9.1 on Board Game Geek, a rating of 9.1, and a ranking of 139 overall. For a game that doesn't have very many copies in circulation, and not a lot of people are willing to pay the amount of money for, and you probably shouldn't. Now, for any other Kickstarter game, you can totally chalk that up to the Kickstarter effect. I'm not going to deny that exists at all. I don't have that because I've gotten so many terrible Kickstarter games, I'm totally fucking over that. And that's why I don't back as many Kickstarter games anymore. Because I know most of them are terrible. But there certainly are people out there who invest so much money in a game on Kickstarter and they don't want to admit to themselves that it's either bad or at least mediocre. And yet, this game finally, it's been out for like a year and a half now. The people who love it keep playing it over and over again. They keep coming back to the forums and talking about it. They keep singing its praises. And they inspired a horde of other people to back the game again on Kickstarter just a couple of weeks ago. Actually, just a week ago, at the time that I'm filming this, it wrapped up, to the tune of, I think, $12.3 million. The original campaign made $2 million. And set a record at that time. It is the 4th ranked project overall, and the highest funded board game on Kickstarter by a wide margin. I think something like 19,000 people backed it, and that might be I might be wrong on that, but a lot of people backed it for a game that is so expensive. And the updated version, the updated pack was all very expensive stuff too. And it's not a fluke, okay? Or people who just want to say, oh, it's Kickstarter people just rating their game high and they never change their rating. Maybe one or two. I'm telling you, this is a game like no other. And I was fully prepared when I backed it and spent too much money on the first version and spent too much money again on the next one, by the way. But I spent way too much money on it. I was almost ashamed of myself. The time went on. 3 years went by before we got the core game, which is worrisome even for a small piddling game. And everyone, including myself, was just like, well, and we still didn't know much about the gameplay. It's probably going to be terrible. We just got to accept that we probably just bought a very nice box of plastic and just move on with our lives, sell it for what we can. Lo and behold, the game is the most amazing thing I've ever played. How do I even begin to describe it? It's a fully cooperative game. It's civilization building. You are people dropped into the middle of this hellish nightmarescape that you're never given any explanation for, and you have to survive against these bizarre monstrosities and twisted, barely human beings you come across. And you start off with nothing but loincloth and a stone. You find other people like yourselves. You use the parts of your monsters to build up your society, to build equipment and weapons for yourself, to make the places you can build these stuffs at your society. You make babies from constituent parts. No, the old-fashioned way. And then you have more warriors eventually. You go through different lantern years, which are gameplay sessions, and you just get incrementally stronger while the threats that you face get overwhelmingly stronger. And you die a lot, and you sometimes trudge on and continue to live and build up your society and just get better and better. But more importantly, you as a player are getting better all the time, and the experience that you get is so overwhelmingly just full of excitement and tenseness, and it's richly thematic storytelling. It's dark, it's horrific at times, it's inspiring at times. There are times when you just succeed in combat and when all the odds are against you, and it's overwhelmingly inspiring and uplifting for you as a group working together. And you go back and get some really cool shit that you make back at your place, and it scratches every itch. You have the storytelling of an RPG to some degree. You have the campaign-style gameplay of a game like Descent, but then you have little bits of civilization building. You have wonderful, dark, and gritty illustrations, fantastic miniatures that you do have to assemble, but once you do, they're gorgeous. And just so many individual systems, unique and innovative systems. The way that the monsters react, the game plays them with the AI deck, and the way that you craft items, and the way that you put the items on yourself has its own system too, and it's fantastic. And yet, with all this stuff, it never feels overwhelming because you have a vested interest in making sure your character is as good as they possibly can be in service of your civilization, your Lantern Horde. And working together, and because you're so invested in everything, the time flies when you're playing this game. It works good solo. It works good in a group. What else can I say? I did an hour-long review on the thing. Go and watch me ramble more about it there. It's a beautiful, wonderful, horrific game, and there's even more stuff coming for it, and I'm overwhelmed. I haven't even delved into everything from the original with all the expansions. That's how much stuff is out for it. This is a lifestyle game, but not in the sense of getting together for Friday Night Kingdom Death at your local game store, in the sense that you can explore the depths of this game for years to come. That's how much stuff will be coming out for it. It's not for everybody. It's grim. It's dark. It's frustrating at times, and it's very expensive. But if you are one of the people lucky enough to play it and enjoy it, it's like no other. I was burnt out on all the crap coming out of the board gaming industry. The same things over and over again. They put new artwork on a game, but it ain't fooling me. It's the same crap we've had over and over again. This is something different and substantive and good. And not every game needs to be like this going forward, but every game could learn a few lessons from the innovation that's in this game. Kingdom Death Monster, proudly and unabashedly, my number one game at this moment. Over on Board Game Geek, though, actually not a lot of negative ratings, but 216 Stitches says, very simply, misogynist. Who, me? Folks, that is it. That's the list for 2016 rolling into 2017, but we're not exactly done yet. If you don't care about anything else, then we're done here, and I'll see you next year. But if you want to know some stats, some interesting things and tidbits about the list, you can come back from my little wrap-up video, which will be going up at the same time as this, my little final thoughts thing, where we'll just talk more about some of the things on the list. That's all it is. But hey, even if you're bailing right now, thank you so much for watching, and thank you for your patience. I really appreciate it. I love putting this together. I love doing it for you guys. I love rambling to you, and hopefully you had fun too. Thanks so much. We'll see you next year or later this year. Take care.